Hi YouTubers, I'm back for another YouTube video of what would have happened if this were in real life. Now, I tried over and over again, and it's kind of and I've been doing a lot of trying it to get which topic I'd be doing for which for which kind of these YouTube videos. And it's also special what would have happened if this were in real life YouTube video because in next week Wednesday will actually be World Rhino Day, so you should all be excited for that. And I've got just the perfect idea for next week's YouTube video on Wednesday of next week. So yeah, I guess that's that. So yeah, so this is what would have happened if the Chima movie were in real life. Now we cut open to the beginning where Lavelle, Krager, and Harris, they're all enjoying their lives. Lavelle and Harris are, are already married. Lavelle and Harris are already married, in which of course that kind of just makes sense. And then Krager would end up being best man, so that's what would happen. So the Chima movie would actually start off with like a romantic start, which is kind of very obvious. And then, of course, well, you would already know that. That is until Lavelle's mother Lavelle's mother, which of course, I'm just gonna with Lavelle's mother, Love, which is basically then Lavelle's mother, Love, who of course would be the wife of Lavelle's father, which of course I forgot his name, and he's technically the narrator of the beginning intro. So yeah, so they eventually all go together, and well, yeah, that is until Lavelle's mother eventually is mentioned by Lavelle's dad to Lavelle. Lavelle's dad, which I remember his name, actually tells Lavelle that his mother was actually one of the greatest of their tribes in all of Chima. It was actually one of the greatest lines in all of Chima. Well, technically, with her being the only female line in Chima, which of course, this is how the story goes. Sure, I'll be able to do TV show versions of this, but that's all for later. So eventually, Lavelle's mother is eventually mentioned by Lavelle's dad to Lavelle, and then that basically does that. Then of course, then there's a time jump, then we time jump all the way to 26 years late 46 years later. Well, 26 to 46 years later, where Lavelle and Eris are actually a mother and father of their own children, which are both lion and eagle children, which of course kind of does make sense. Lavelle and Eris's daughter is actually an eagle, and of course Lavelle and Eris's son is actually a lion. So you can see exactly why it is. And seeing how I did the Ninjago movie, I figured why not do the Chima movie. Seeing how I did the Ninjago live-action PG movie, I figured why not do the same thing with the Chima live-action PG movie. So eventually everything is going well and good for Lavelle and Eris, and they're just letting their son and daughter play with like the chi and play with like the stuff out there, play with like the stuff in the woods. That's until when they find out. That's until when Lavelle and Eris's children actually find a thing that finds Lavelle's mother in. After they dig up the hole, they find a lion human down there, which it turns out ends up being Lavelle's mother. Then Lavelle's mother is accidentally awoken by Lavelle and Eris's children. They run away, and they tell Lavelle and Eris that Lavelle's mom, who is named Love, eventually Lavelle's Lavelle's mother, who is eventually named Love, eventually appears herself, and here we get to see that. And then of course that would make that would make Lavelle's father and uncle kind of like the grandparents, kind of like the grandbrothers of the Lavelle and Eris's children, which kind of does make sense. Yeah, so Lavelle's mother, which is named Love, which Love is actually Lavelle's mother, and then of course there would be like a Star Wars joke. There of course would be like a tiny Star Wars pop culture reference joke in there where where Lavelle's mother actually says I'm your, which of course there is, or unless if there was, yeah, there would be a Star Wars and Skylanders tiny pop culture reference with pop culture reference tiny pop culture reference like quote, which of course is actually very obvious, which of course you'd see exactly why. So Lavelle and Harrison, Lavelle's dad and uncle, they all have to combine, bring back everybody else. This means they have to bring back like Krieger and all the other characters, which of course is kind of very obvious. So all the characters from the Chima TV show would appear in the Chima live action PG movie. I figured it would be best to reintroduce them, and then of course that is. So eventually, Lavelle's mother Love brings her whole evil lying human army to attack, like to steal all the chi and conquer, to steal all the chi and conquer Chima as well. Which of course this is kind of what I was thinking of to begin with. This is what I'm envisioning, just like how I've envisioned with like the Jimmy Neutron live action movie and the Ninjago live action movie, the Skylanders live action movie, the Spyro live action movie, and of course the Crash Bandicoot live action movie. All of this is going according to plan. Meanwhile, Lavelle, Krieger, Harrison, their children, and of course all their children and wives, and including all the other and Lavelle and Lavelle's other friends. I forgot all their names. They eventually all have a fight in battle scene, which I know this seems a little bit early. Like they were planning out their fight in battle scene against Lavelle's mother Love, which of course is kind of very obvious. Well, only to find technically Lavelle's mother is actually Love L, which is actually called Lavelle, which of course is kind of very different. So Lavelle is actually Lavelle's mother. So yeah, well technically you already would know that. So they finally have their own fighting battle scene and all that. They're all like going against Lavelle's mother and her evil lying human army. And here you can see exactly it's very great and all. Now, I mean, it actually does kind of make sense. There's like a big fight scene and battle scene, and that's where we are right now. So there would be then of course there would be an emotional scene where they would have to retreat. However, there would be another fighting battle scene, but it would be like an ultimate cinematic Lego cinematic fighting battle scene, which of course is kind of very obvious. There's an emotional scene where Krieger actually sacrifices himself for Lavelle and his children, and for Lavelle and Eris and their children, which is kind of very obvious, seeing how Krieger was the best man at Lavelle and Eris's wedding. So there would eventually there would be an emotional scene where he sacrifices himself, in which case that kind of does make sense. And I mean, of course there would also be funny scenes later on, like funny scenes at like the ending of that, but I'm just giving out that kind of detail. So meanwhile Lavelle and Eris, they would eventually have to, Lavelle, Eris, and all of Lavelle's Eris's friends, friends, they would all, eventually come back to Lavelle's mother, Lavelle, and then there would finally be an ultimate Lego, a cinematic fight and battle scene that would go on. That would be one of the best ones to go on by far. And of course, Lavelle would say, would give a speech before that fight, ultimate Lego, a cinematic fight and battle scene where they shall do it for, where Lavelle says that they should do this for Krager, despite the fact that he was an enemy during the Chima season 1 and season 1 TV show, despite the fact that he was sometimes one of the villains for the TV show. So yeah, that kind of just makes sense. So eventually they would all have one. They would have one ultimate, a Lego, a cinematic fighting battle scene, one that would do that. Lavelle's mother, Lavelle, is actually going, and your evil lying human army are eventually going after them. Then Lavelle's mother eventually retreats, and then Lavelle's mother eventually is brought back to the good side, just like how those ice warriors from the Chima season 2 returned to the good side. And then everyone eventually lives happily ever after. There's a few couple funny scenes at the end, and I mean, there's also some funny scenes before. And, well, Lavelle and Eris and their children and everyone else in Chima eventually lived happily ever after. The end. And then the credits roll. Now, I actually think that was a perfectly good story. I mean, I couldn't think of anything else. I mean, seeing how I've already done the Ninjago live-action PG movie, I figured why not do the Chima live-action PG movie? I mean, sure, I don't have a lot of ideas as of right now. I have to find out which material which kind of topics that I can do for this. I mean, seeing how I've already done, remember when I did the Lego Chima's Lavelle's Journey on the Nintendo remember when I did that a long time ago? Remember when I did the Lego Chima video game a long time ago? So I figured why not do the what would have happened if the Chima movie were in real life? So I figured why not do that one? And seeing how I've done a lot of live-action PG, and seeing how I've done a lot of these ideas before, and how it kind of just makes sense, I guess it's worth all the while. So yeah, and that's it for today. Peace out. Bye bye.